There is a particular quiet that falls over a man when something inside him begins to shift. It is not loud, not dramatic, not even visible to the untrained eye. It arrives gently, like dusk settling over a familiar street, soft, unannounced, yet undeniably changing the shape of everything it touches. People often mistake this silence for indifference, for distance, for a sign that love has thinned or interest has faded. But the truth is rarely so. Behind that quiet withdrawal lies an entire inner landscape, unspoken fears, unmapped memories, and the ancient instinct to retreat into the self. This silence is not empty. It is full of meaning, and when understood through the lens of Jung's psychology, it becomes less of a disappearance and more of a revelation. There is a moment, often small, nearly invisible, when a man begins to step back into himself. It does not come with a warning. It does not come with a clear explanation. It comes quietly, like a tide that begins to pull away long before anyone notices the shore growing wider. Sometimes it starts with a pause long enough to feel unfamiliar, a message left unanswered a little longer than usual, a softness replaced by something slightly more distant. The change is subtle, but its impact resonates deeply with those who sense it. For the person on the outside, this shift feels like the ground gently tilting. A question begins to form: is something wrong? Yet the silence provides no clues. It only expands, creating an echo where closeness once lived. Most people assume this withdrawal is a reaction to them, a reflection of something they did or failed to do. But the truth is often far more internal. When a man pulls away, he is usually not running from the relationship. He is retreating from something within himself. This first chapter is a doorway into that internal landscape. To understand what happens in this moment, imagine a man carrying thoughts he cannot fully articulate, emotions that rise too quickly, expectations he fears he cannot meet. There is a point when the weight becomes heavy enough that his instinct is not to reach outward for support, but to contract inward for safety. This is the emotional equivalent of holding his breath. He may not even realize he is withdrawing. To him, it feels natural, almost automatic, a familiar reflex shaped long before adulthood taught him how relationships are supposed to work. The silence offers him space to think. Even when he is not consciously thinking, it offers him solitude. Even when he feels lonely inside it, to the outside world, it can look like avoidance. In truth, it is self-protection. Many men describe this moment as a sudden need to figure things out, but the figuring rarely happens in tidy, organized thoughts. It happens in sensations: tightness in the chest, restlessness, a drifting focus. Something feels off inside him, and before he can name it, he steps back from the people who care. This withdrawal is not always tied to conflict. It can appear even when everything seems calm, because pulling away is not about the surface, it is about the layers beneath it. Humans carry emotional thresholds. Men, in particular, are often conditioned to endure more than they can actually process. And so the first sign that their inner capacity has been exceeded is not an expression of emotion, but a retreat from it. This chapter focuses on that threshold, the moment where his inward turn begins. Jung once noted that people are drawn to the outside world until the inner voice grows too loud to ignore. For many men, this voice is quiet but persistent. It calls them inward, when something unresolved begins to stir. Perhaps it is fear, perhaps it is vulnerability, perhaps it is an old memory brushing against a present moment. But he may not have the language to explain these things, so instead, he steps into silence. This silence can be misunderstood as indifference, but it is often a sign of internal turbulence, a storm without visible rain, a heaviness he does not yet know how to share. In this first phase of withdrawal, there is no rejection, only overwhelm, only the sense that something inside him is shifting faster than he can comprehend. It is here before the origin stories, before the psychological explanations, before the inner battles that the retreat begins. It is the spark before the shadow appears, the tremor before the quake. Every man who withdraws enters this moment of inner turning, and understanding this moment is the first step toward seeing the truth beneath his silence. Long before a man learns how to love, he learns how to protect himself, and more often than not, that lesson begins in childhood quietly, subtly, almost invisibly. This chapter steps into those early rooms of his life, where emotional blueprints are formed before he even knows he is building them. A boy is born with softness, with natural sensitivity, with an instinct to cry when something hurts, and to reach out when he feels alone. But very early, he begins to absorb the world around him, and the world has its own expectations. It tells him, in 1,000 small ways, that his softness must be contained. He hears it in the tone of adults who say, "Be strong," before he understands what strength even means. He feels it in the subtle withdrawal when he shows too much fear. He senses it in the way approval arrives when he is calm, quiet, or composed, and disappears when emotions rise too visibly. Some boys are raised with tenderness, yet still experience this shaping. Others grow up in harsher environments where love is conditional, and emotions are treated like inconveniences. In both cases, the lesson is absorbed the same way. Your feelings are something you must manage alone, so he learns to tuck them away, often without realizing he is doing it. This is where Jung's concept of the shadow begins, not in adulthood, but in those early years when a boy discovers which parts of himself are welcomed and which are dismissed. The rejected emotions, fear, sadness, vulnerability, are pushed downward, inward, into a quiet internal basement where they wait, unprocessed, by adolescence. Many boys have perfected a kind of emotional armor, not because they lack depth, but because they lack permission. Silence begins to feel safer than expression. Distance becomes easier than admitting confusion, and withdrawal becomes a familiar refuge, a place where he can retreat without judgment. This conditioning does not vanish with age. It follows him into adulthood, into relationships, into moments where closeness requires exposure. When someone gets emotionally close, the old patterns are triggered, not consciously, not deliberately, but automatically, like a childhood script playing itself again. A partner asks a gentle question, and he hears an echo of pressure. Someone expresses worry, and he feels an old tug towards self-containment. A moment of vulnerability appears, and the instinct to retreat rises before he can reason with it. The origins of his silence are not in the present. They are rooted in years of being taught that emotions must be hidden or minimized. Some men were raised in families where practical needs were met, but emotional needs were invisible, not from cruelty, but from tradition, from generations of men who were themselves raised to be stoic. This creates a lineage of emotional distance inheritance, passed not through words, but through absence. Other men grew up with fathers who struggled to express anything beyond anger or neutrality. Mothers who carried the emotional labor alone, not realizing that their sons were learning from what was missing rather than what was present. He grows up learning that his interior world is something to keep private, so when adulthood asks him to be emotionally available, a conflict arises. His instinct to pull away doesn't come from lack of care, it comes from emotional habits shaped long before love became a possibility. This chapter is about those early echoes, the quiet teachings that build the man long before he becomes aware of himself. These echoes do not disappear. They walk beside him into every relationship, resurfacing whenever deep connection invites him to confront the parts of himself he was taught to bury. And when a man pulls away in silence, it is often not the partner he is retreating from. He is retreating from the ghosts of his upbringing, from rules he once followed to survive, from emotional structures built in a world that didn't know how to nurture his softness. This chapter ends with a simple truth. Before a man withdraws from others, he has already been withdrawing from himself for years. To understand a man's silence, one must step gently into the psychological mechanics behind it, not the surface behaviors, but the quiet systems beneath the instinctive reactions, the unconscious patterns, the emotional circuitry wired long before he could control it. Withdrawal is not random, it follows a sequence the mind knows by heart. At the most basic level, the human nervous system is built to protect. When a man feels emotionally overwhelmed by expectations, by closeness, by fear of letting someone down, his body interprets it as a signal, not a threat in the logical sense, but a threat to the stability he has spent years maintaining inside himself, and so his system responds. Some men experience the fight response in small ways: irritability, sharpness, defensiveness. Others slip into freeze, becoming still, distant, unreachable. But many, especially those conditioned to appear composed, rely on flight, not a dramatic escape, not a physical departure, but a psychological one, a slow drifting inward, a quiet disappearance into thought, a soft shutting of the emotional door. From the outside, it looks like silence. From the inside, it feels like containment. Jung spoke often of complexes, autonomous emotional patterns, formed by early experiences. They operate beneath awareness, influencing behavior like invisible currents.